Good morning, everyone. How you doing? My name's Pete Allor, and as you can tell, I'm from IBM. A little bit about myself. I've been in the security business now, well, it depends how you want to count it, 15, 16 years in the private sector, because I'm making that transition. I guess it's this month I hit 16. Before that, I was what we affectionately called a knuckle dragger. In other words, I was in the military. I started as an infantryman, and then I went to special operations. I was in special forces, did all that wild and crazy stuff, you know, jump out of airplanes, jump out of helicopters, climb out of submarines underwater, meaning they were moving still. And for some odd reason, one day I was sitting in an operations shop, and my boss walked in, and he's looking for what I call a victim. I didn't know what he was looking for, but I thought I'd hide by typing on a Wang keyboard, you know, dumb terminal. And at that point, he turned out and he says, you're going to computer school. And all I asked was, what did I do wrong? That was back in the 80s. So it was an interesting start for a career. And I said, I uttered the 5-letter word that you don't use, the word never. Because every time you use never, you come about that. So today I'm going to talk a little about risk and how we kind of got there, and I'm going to talk a little bit, how do you map yourself? How do you develop a strategy? Because often when I go and talk with people, they say, I don't know how to do this. And so as way of background, I missed a meeting at IBM. I should have learned this in the military, but I'm sometimes a slow learner, hence I drag knuckles. I didn't show up, so I got to help articulate the IBM position for the NIST Cyber Security Framework. See, no good deeds go unpunished. So what do we start with? And a little bit of history. Once upon a time, we all were walking down roads because there weren't cars or trains, and a highwayman showed up, and he went ahead and he robbed us. So then we advanced to trains. And here in the United States, we had great train robberies, you know. The Westerns depict people being chased down, and they board a train from a horse and all that. I think that would be kind of fun, actually. Dangerous, but fun. And then we moved to telephones. And we still have that telephone problem, but, you know, for those of us who were breached by the IRS, I actually got phone calls. And they knew a lot of data, but that's not the only way. And so now it's moved where the criminal doesn't have to take the danger of riding a horse or carrying a club. He just needs a computer, and he can make a lot of money. So that's the change in what we've had over time. That sets the stage for, in each one of those areas, we've developed a method for overcoming that. Whether it was a stagecoach and a strong box and a guy with a shotgun or extra riders, through our defenses today. But like any bad guy, any attacker, and this is my background, you tell me that you've put in the defense, and I look for a way around it. And there is where our challenge is. How do we address that? So I show this little slide from IDC from 2003. And my question to you is, what changed? Oh, we have a couple techniques that are named a little differently, or they kind of replace. But if you really look at the threat landscape actors, the threat landscape attacks have not changed greatly, if we really think about it. Oh, ransomware's come about, and so have a few other things, and all that. But look at DDoS. What changed in DDoS? Besides the size. Yeah, okay. You know, 799 gigabytes per second last week. You know, actually, Krebs actually staying more like 500 to 600 most of the 4 days that attack started. But he's a test case. And what was the interesting part about that attack? Internet of Things. So it was set-top DVRs and wireless IP cameras. From where? Yeah, but what geography? No, it wasn't. It was not. It was Asia. Almost entirely Asia. Think about that. From Asia? What happens if you piled Europe and North America onto that? 1 terabyte is easy. We have a new way to look at things. So how do you deal with that risk? You have to understand what that risk is. So what do we have for today? This is really the challenge that we're looking at. This is what we hear our clients talk to. Okay? Advanced attacks. I really don't like the term APT because that's really FUD, FUD. Let's get out of jail. It's like, oh, that's the A team. I can't compete. I'm not giving anything away. But they're still there. But that's not the entirety of the problem. So let's not focus as if that's the entirety of the problem. Because you have a lot of criminal gangs who are there simply to steal from you. It's worth something. You know, they're talking right now, the Yahoo data breach, 500 million records. One sale of that data set was $300,000. Wow. Real cash. Human error. Big issue. Our greatest asset, our largest weakness. People are people. They always have been. They do unintended things. For the most part, they don't know. They're not aware. And of course, we've made it really complex with passwords. Anyone here use a password safe? See, not even, about a third, a little bit, almost 40%. Folks, I don't know how you memorize all those passwords. I can't. I have a password safe. I have a really long password. Actually, it's passphrase. It's 26 keystrokes. Okay? And something I use from an old skit on a TV show. That's how I remember it, with punctuation and spaces. So we have to think differently. But unfortunately, we're using compliance as the means to get there. We always have. It's really easy. From an IT security perspective, what do we say? Well, the checklist says, and we went down the checklist. The install checklist is this, okay? The monthly checklist is that. And folks, we got away from addressing the threat. But what is threat? Is threat a vulnerability? Is it a person? Is it an action? So we've confused that. But are we really going to know all the actions and intents of the bad guy? For our purposes, the fact that they want the data that they want on our networks should be sufficient. So now, what's the thing we're protecting? How bad do we need to protect it? We need to change that conversation. Because when you look at the head of an agency, you look at the head of any private sector organization, everyone has a different perspective. And I bring this to your attention because as a IT security professional, what do we talk in? Well, our NIDS, IPv6, okay, AV, endpoint, something. And we bring out this litany of technical terms and the eyes glaze. What are they talking about? And so I go back to my special forces background. When I went somewhere, it was best that we speak in their language. Hence, I can speak a smattering of Hangul and Arabic and French and stuff like that. But when you start to talk in their language, not that you have all the language, they go, wait a minute, this is somebody I can talk to. Go talk to an industrial control system operator, and if you can't talk about DMP3 and HMIs and talk it as industrial control as opposed to SCADA, they're not going to listen. You need to have their attention. We need to stop talking this. This is important. Don't get me wrong. This is what a CISO wants to talk to. This is what he needs to look at. And he has a breakdown. Because see, he's mapping how he protects and what he's protecting from. He's starting his conversation towards risk. But he's not talking to the business. So what do you need to do? You got to talk to business. Because if we're Dr. No, the great Dr. No, we have a problem. They don't come to us. And so you see a cloud being done by a line of business, by an agency, by a section, because they need it. That's what everyone else is doing, so they make that leap forward, and you have no idea on how to protect it. You have no idea how to advise them to watch out for something. You have no idea that it's attached to the rest of your network. And if you don't know that, it is the avenue of approach for any adversary. So we need to talk to all this, because this is how they're operating. You know, how many do social? Anyone do LinkedIn? Anyone do Twitter? You're with me. I don't do any of those. Oh, well, I have to say, I have to do LinkedIn, but I don't do Twitter or Facebook or any of those other socials. I have a YouTube channel, but it's very small and it's about model airplanes. You know, my traffic's really low. But you're going to send me something like that? I'm probably not going to touch it. So let's talk about a major factor here. I'm going to use this chart to illustrate to you why the problem is in your doorstep. All those bubbles represent a breach. And the larger the bubble, the larger the breach. Yahoo, of course, is not represented here. So look over time. We said back in 2011 that was the year of the breach. We only mapped half the year. And it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay? The color represents the type of breach. Now I'll give you an example. Do you see these bubbles? That orange-looking color? SQL injection. How long have we had SQL? I mean, like, when some of us started, we were youngsters. Decades. Like nearly 30. Not decades, years. Just checking. And yet we commit that. So my question for you is, what vendor did that? Was that an IBM, a Microsoft, an Oracle? Was it a browser guy? And the answer is, none of those. You are the vendor. You created that problem. That's a very broad you, because everyone who's doing websites and linking data sets and databases to them and publishing applications for whatever mobile platform is creating this problem. So in essence, we've all become vendors, and we forgot about secure development and secure architecture and how it goes into our entire environment. We have to think broader now. Because organized crime, by the way, APT, or I look at sophisticated attack, has moved down to organized crime as a technique. But no one needs to use a 0-day. We're averaging over 7,800 new vulnerabilities per year for the last 6 years. Now, here's the good news. You probably use less than half. Here's some of the bad news. Some. Over half those vulnerabilities are never patched. So the question for you is, what's in your environment? Do you know? That's our challenge. So if you're into some of these industries, you have a huge problem. We used to think healthcare was not an issue. Who's going to steal anything about a manufacturing process? I'll tell you what, a lot of people in the world. If you look at sophisticated attack, I bet you could go and tell me the top 10. You'd probably miss number 1. But the top 10, that's great. The real issue is there's about 70 countries that do that. That's nearly half. So if everyone's doing that, what do you think crime is doing? That's our problem. And they're using these vectors against everywhere our business wants to go. But the story still continues. Why are we concerned about risk? So we highlighted a customer, a very large customer, someone you call very good. It's a US-based. 85 products in their system. 85 from 45 vendors. Guess what 2 things they learned? Number 1, it didn't stop the threat. It got in, they They didn't even see it. They were compromised. Number two, the products didn't integrate and they couldn't tell what in the world was going on. And everyone went with that great conclusion. I said, there's a number three. You know how much staff they used for all those things that were stovepipes? And then they wondered why they couldn't accomplish anything because everyone was manning that and they couldn't operate together. They had no single picture. So how do you address risk? And yet, everyone talks about information sharing like it's going to overcome something. And look at the number of CEOs who are afraid to because they're worried about liability. I get the liability. But we can scrub data pretty good. The question is, who's going to start? So, how do you get ready for tomorrow? Good question, right? But the real question is, when we talk to everyone, what are they looking at? All these buzz terms we keep using. They're important, don't get me wrong. When I talked to IBM about we need to have a P cert and C cert, I took a deck, it was 22 slides long. You know what's at the very top? 3 bullets. I didn't know how to speak an executive. I was knuckle dragging. And that's what we have a tendency to do. So how do we take all this and make it into something that an executive understands? Or, what's that? Yeah, look at the dollars. You got to group it. You got to group it in a way that maps to what you're doing and what all those products are accomplishing. In other words, simplify. Change it into a grouping term and move away from just calling it byproducts. As an industry, we can confuse you because we got products. You just walk out here and you can look at everyone has something that does everything that you're asking for. And your real question is, can you give me a simple what it does? More importantly, does it integrate that I can actually see and do from a single set and I don't care which vendor it came from? If you can't make it into that pile, then why do I need to have you as part of my 85? I don't need 85 products. I really don't want 45 vendors. But I need my stuff to work together. That's the key. So how do we get there? Let's talk about risk. Risk, wow, an interesting thing. It's the buzzword of the industry now. It's how everyone's going to do it. And the real question is, what kind of conversation are we having? And to do that, you have to understand why we're having the conversation. So back in 2012, we did a CISO assessment. This is IBM, 137 organizations. We did it as a double blind. In other words, we didn't get to see it. And when we looked at the results, we were surprised because at first we couldn't figure out what in the world happened. It did not turn out anywhere near where we thought it would go. And we had to sift through the data, and all of a sudden, we started to see 3 things: influencers, protectors, responders. Now, I challenge you to go and look and read that study because it really lays out a lot of things here for you. It helps you formulate an idea of how you're going to organize to talk to business. A responder, you're basically just looking at what's coming in, and I'm responding to every event as they smack me. You don't have a lot of staff, and you're doing all the work. And what do I mean by that? I mean that you, as an IT organization, are assuming here's what you need to do, here's how you need to protect the business, and here's what the risk is. The business is not involved. And if you're there right now, you're a responder. And you got a tough road to hoe. If you're a protector, you're starting to share some of that, how do I decide? And you're getting input from business, and they might help fund part of what you're trying to do because they see the need. It's the influencer you want to work towards because you want them to own the risk decision, to accept when they don't follow that, and to plan where you're going to go. So not just funding today's project, they're looking at where you should go in the future. That's where you need the business to be. But as IT professionals, we've got to make that case and show it to the business because that's how they operate. So when President Obama first talked about cybersecurity for the first time in 2012 State of the Union address, and in 2013, at the time that the State of the Union was happening again, he ordered Executive Order 13636. Now, the interesting part about executive orders, if you don't work a lot with the federal government, is the executive order only applies to the federal departments and agencies. Only the federal government. But what he did in there is he encouraged that the private sector be engaged. And as we got engaged, the question was, how do I get them to move forward? You can see what the challenge was. He's looking about the nation's critical infrastructure. Let me put that into a different term. I'll use military terms, but I'll use them in a simple way. Any government operates from elements of national power. And you assume naturally that national power equates to military power, and you're correct. But what that really is based on is economic power. If you look at history, we went to wars, we, the world, to war over economic issues. And that's what he's talking to, is the economic vitality of the United States and the private sector and the consumer is important because the threat is really that large. If you get to talk to Admiral Rogers, I get to see him about once every 6 months for about 4 hours as part of a group that advises. That's what he's talking to. He's the commander of Cyber Command, just in case you don't know who Admiral Rogers is, or NSA if you look at it that way. So NIST came up with a cybersecurity framework. The objective, and something the private sector has pushed back as we move towards version 2, is it is voluntary. It is voluntary. I heard a defense industrial base client talk to, there's 189 mandatory controls in there. He said, whoa, you missed the entire what's going on. You're not assuming risk, you're checking the box, you went back to compliance. Just this week, came out for comment, the draft framework for manufacturing. It's out to, I think, November 7th. If you're in manufacturing or you know people in manufacturing, they ought to take a look because it swivels the entire framework to that. Utilities are doing the same, financials are doing the same. You're going to see that go across vertical industries. So that's important. What does that mean for all of us in the rest of the world? Well, we did another study. Nice thing about IBM is we do things like that because it really helps you understand where it's going. It helps us understand where the market's at. What we learned is that a lot of organizations are trending now away from compliance checklists. That means the market is adopting the approach that the president pushed forward. And the question now is, what framework? Did you know there's multiples? And if you look at NIST, they have the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. They have the Risk Management Framework, which is oriented towards government. And that goes right into 853, and whether you're on version 2, 3, or 4, it's a matter of how you pick the flavor, but you need to have something. You need a discussion. So what is it that a framework is trying to accomplish? Now, what we saw, and it came from the impetus of the federal government within the United States, and I remember talking this at I did 5 of the 6 framework seminars, the multi-day things. And number 4, we are in California, out here in California, down in San Diego. Why aren't we talking internationally? So NIST went and talked internationally. Do you realize the rest of the world is now adopting risk management? Some are adopting slightly different frameworks. That's based on their geography and their culture, but they're addressing risk. So as a business and as a government, there's no reason not to go this way. The rest of the world is going. But it allows us to talk about priorities. Now, instead of IT security guessing what the priority is, we are looking for a priority coming from the business. Not necessarily from the CEO. The CEO endorses and all that, but from a line of business, from the department within an agency, or an agency within a department, depending on how you organize. I've seen both, especially in the U.S. federal government. Okay? And now we're talking about how we consume security. Now, there's been a lot of drivers, which I talked about in the first part, is no one wants to be on the front page. You know, who wants to be CEO of a 500 million set data breach? You do? Well, I guess, yeah. Well, I guess, okay, you got me there. I didn't think that upside. There is always an upside. Sometimes you got to search long and hard, but there is an upside. Excellent. Keep me on my toes. Okay, so collaboration with the C-suite or the executives in your department. I don't know how many people are state agencies here, so you know, do it interchangeably. It's a tool. It's not gospel. It's not thou shalt have to do this exact way. That's the nice part about what we talk about in the tool, is how do you adapt it? How do you make it work for yours? But you got to have their support, because without their support, it doesn't work. You know, if emphasis isn't from the top, no one at the bottom is going to do it. And the guys in the middle who actually control the business aren't willing to push and invest in it. So it's a whole organization discussion. But it's led by executives. It's kind of steered by the CISO and hopefully the CIO, because they should be on the same time. Okay? Notice that 25% of the CISOs thought they were spending appropriately when they use a framework. What that means is now they're starting to set an expectation of where their investment should be, and they're not overspending. Believe it or not, a large majority thought they were overspending prior to having a framework, but they weren't getting results. And that was the danger. So now they can articulate a strategy. I'll tell you, I talked to, one was a healthcare, one was a entertainment delivery service. If I narrow it anymore, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When I went and talked to them about their strategy, you know what I got? A 2-sentence vision statement. Vision? That's your strategy? That's how you can defend your business? And how much money do you have coming in through your network? Let me tell you, it was not 7 figures. It was not 8 figures. They were in the 9-figure category. Yeah. So don't think just size means you automatically know what you're doing. Okay? And they were complex organizations. By the way, when you do a framework, realize this. You do not need to do a single framework. In IBM, we started with 3 framework assessments. That was our starting point. What do we do for IBM.com? What do we do for IBM products and services? And what do we do with customers? And then we subdivided from there on the next iteration. You do the same thing. Okay, to do that, you have to develop. So you got to get past your compliance thought process, and you got to get into, what do I have? How do I identify that? Because, you know, the biggest objection I hear from most people is, I'm not going to do that. You know what the subtitle is? I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. Somebody's going to discover I'm not doing enough. Or, I'll put myself out of work. Folks, we have a skill shortage. We have a personnel shortage. We're going to change what you're doing and focus on something more meaty. Automate this. Get rid of that bottom stuff. Get on something that's fruitful. Talk to your analysts. They're tired of doing copy-paste and putting things from one thing to another and being out of time and rushing and not really getting real work done. I bet you feel the same way. Realize you got to direct it. And then you got to start applying certain insights. The insights come from the discussion, by the way. So I'm going to talk to you about, I called it 5 types. I got a white paper on this you want to know. You probably thought, I didn't know there was different types of frameworks. So let's talk about them. The NIST Cybersecurity Framework is what I would call a process space. You know what process that is? Incident response. Think about it. It's an incident response process. If you look at the IBM Security Framework, we call it a domain-based. We've had that now for, I think, 8 years, 9 years, okay? What do I mean by domains? It's kind of how we operate in IT. Think about it. Infrastructure, think about your networks and endpoints. People, identity management, access management, privilege management. Applications, development of applications, deployment of applications, testing of applications, static and dynamic. Data, database warehousing, database management, database encryption, database access. Think about it in your organization. In your organization, do those all fall together security-wise underneath the CISO? And I'll bet you at least one of those is probably underneath a line of business. So now you see why you have the matrix. And if you don't have all that in one picture, what are you missing? You're missing how I'm breaching you and stealing you blind. As an attacker, what 2 things am I looking for? Well, that's how I get there. What am I looking for out of you? Credentials, that's my number 2. Most people get the first one. I want the data. Simply, why do I want the data? Because I can cash you out. You're nothing but a chip. But the credentials, if you have any security, if I have credentials, I have the data. Especially if I can escalate, or better yet, I can get you to give me a privileged identity, and I bet you your security will not do anything about it because I'm named on your domain. And you go, oh, it's a legitimate credential. Go for it. Have fun. That's right. It's all about trust in there. So that's what an attacker wants. Sectoral. Well, if you're in the financial services, you know all about the financial different controls that you have to satisfy. Utility, you have the same thing, only it's called NERC SIP. Okay, trucking, they have theirs. Rail has theirs. Telecom has theirs. My point is almost every sector has some degree of compliance. And so the sectoral compliance one is very heavy. So you can see, as you go through this, you're actually going to do a blend. And as you do that blend, you're going to come out with your organization's framework. And this is one of the biggest pushes we pushed on NIST and what we told the White House and national security staff. We need to be adaptable and flexible because no organization is built like another. Even if you took all the same products, we configured it and operated them differently, it doesn't transfer directly from one on top of another. Now I'll tell you what smart architecture meant. That means there's just a difference between what your risk and management committee determines and what your IT security and IT operations delivers. In other words, don't put the fox in the chicken coop. We can't self-regulate that way. We need to have somebody who develops the organizational framework and somebody who delivers on what you ask for and says, you're asking to do something outside. Do you really need to do that? Oh, well, if you do, can you sign the piece of paperwork saying that you accept risk for how long? And we'll come back and revisit this? And why is that important? And we should do that. Because we have what's today's current profile, as we call it in this framework, and what tomorrow's target profile should be. Where do we want to go? We can't afford to get there now. But this allows you to have a plan to talk about how to get there. It's the how that's important, and how the organization is going to accept that risk, or is going to say, by golly, there's no way in the world that we can leave this data set unprotected. We are going to come up with emergency capital, or we are going to prioritize this first, foremost, and only, because this would destroy the confidence that our citizens or our clients have in us, and the legitimacy of the organization goes away, meaning your brand, your reputation. So, here's why I say the NIST framework is simply instant response. Look at it. I say that because I was on the board of directors for 9 years for the Forum for Incident Response and Security Teams. And I am working through in version 2 of the CSERT Services Framework, Computer Security Incident Response Team. And for those who really need it, we are in draft of the first PCERT one. So I understand incident response process. In fact, when I talked to Adam Sedgwick at NIST, he said, you're right. And believe it or not, that actually comes a little bit out of COBIT, which is an interesting intersection, because when you go domain-based, and I talked about the IBM one, COBIT is definitely in there. It's just abstracted out when I gave you, infrastructure, people, applications, and data. I use the mnemonic iPad for those who need something. That's the only way I can remember, right? Remember, I drag knuckles. That goes right back into elements of 27001, 27002. So there is a natural intersection that you can lend yourself from. Because if you have security and no incident response process, you're doomed. By the way, your incident response process needs out-of-band communications. Because as a bad guy, the third thing I want to do is I want to nestle myself in, not only deep in your network, but I want to nestle myself in on your security group. So when John sends to Pete, I think we have a problem on the network, in an email, I go, ooh, what did they discover? John to Pete, I found 2 of their pieces of malware and where it's sitting, and they're sending comms out to the server. We need to isolate them. We need to bring in IBM Security to go ahead and look at that. Or you can do Mandiant if you want to do that. Same thing. That's what they're going to do. They watch what you're going to do. And the first thing they do, they hide operations, they go low, they bring in more malware to sit there and time bomb itself. So after you do everything, they still own you. Believe me, if you found 2, there's somewhere between 3 and 7 more pieces hidden in your network. Okay, so organizational frameworks. Here's some base characteristics of what you have here, okay? Please blend it. Make it yours. Don't everyone tell you it's got to be cookie cutter. Tell them to go back and read the documentation. Read the approach. Read why sectors are doing it differently. Okay? And then look at things you need to set. And you guys are going to have these slides, so I'm not going to read all those little elements in there, but things that you need to do to help you get there. Okay. That's why a customized framework works for you. It's about getting you past compliance. Have the auditor at the table. Because what you have to do as you go through is use your tools to give the reports that they're going to require and they can't get around because there's some regulator or some other agency that they have to report to. And they will help you. Believe me, they'll be glad to get the reports. The tools will do that. The technology is there to do that, so do it. Now, in this framework, right now, 30% of the organizations out there have adopted some form or in the process of using the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. Now, from an IBM perspective, you don't see us among the 30%. Why? Because we had a framework beforehand. We're still using that. We operate in 129 countries, so our environment is differently. We use that as a check against the rest of what we do. But they're looking 50% in just another 4 years of the state, local, tribal, and private sector will be using the framework. Folks, what that means is that insurance is going to be based on that as actual data starts to come together. If you don't know how to assess yourself, look at NIST just came out with a tool. It's in draft. Go to that tool, use it to help self-assess. Remember I said you have a way to do all this? Well, guess what? We have a white paper. I know a couple other vendors have white papers. Look at the 5 core functions, come across subcategories, and then look at the offerings. Hide the IBM name, put in vendor X and their product, and you can start to map yourself. Then you just go back and you test, what implementation tier am I at? What implementation tier do I need to be at? So we've done that across the entire NIST framework with an entire portfolio, which I challenge others to be the same size, but hey, it gives you a start point. I guarantee you, you're not underwater, you're not in the basement, you're above ground. You are on that road. The question is, do you know where your gaps are? How do you get there? And then you got to look at your maturity levels. Now, here's the interesting part. This is what I gave to NIST that became the implementation tiers. I got an entire work group to buy into our approach. They went to 4 tiers. I don't care, you do 4 tiers, you do 3 tiers. Have a method. But here's a simple way to see how to go ahead and look at it. Or if you need a different picture, here. No product names. It gives you a level so you know where you're at. You do an assessment. Now you can have a conversation in simple terms with your executives. Make it so it's not our buzzwords, and they will get it. And they will start to ask you some real good questions. And as they get more comfortable with it, I've watched that conversation grow. It works. Because here's what you're trying to do as a CISO. Very simply. That's a process you want to go through to get them there. And if you do that, you've organized your organization to be there. You can do this. And I guess use the Home Depot and we can help. Okay? Because at the end of the day, this is what the CISO is doing, but this is what the business is doing. Use us to help you get there. Whether it's services, it's products, whether it's the network side or the data side, doesn't matter. So I think, am I about out of time here? Yeah. I'm going to stop there. You guys are going to get the rest of the slides to help you map some product sets to look at it in a different way. Any questions? You can tell I like this subject. And I was going, normally when I really like a subject, I go so fast you don't understand a word I say because I am like hyper. Don't add coffee. Anyone questions? Listen, you've been a great audience. You really paid attention. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.